Hello, welcome back, everybody, to another year of the Sunday Plodcast.
I'm Ollie Lamb.
And I'm Matt Seddon.
Back in 2025 for our 5th season. You can expect more of this.
He's claiming that he was ill before the semi-final, whatever. But, you know, I just feel like at that point he was just looking for attention.
And some of this.
Elio normally say, no human is limited. So I can't limit myself, or I can't just say I can do.
As well as event coverage around all the major races on the UK circuit.
And if you're a fan of the pod, please give us a rating and review on your preferred podcast streaming service.
And if you want to stay up to date with all the latest news, give us a follow on Instagram at Sunday Plodcast.
As always, thanks for listening. See you next time. And we hope you enjoyed the episode.
Right, welcome back, everybody. We have a special couple guests for you today in Josh and Jack from Flycarb. And I think you boys put it perfectly when we were arranging this podcast. A grassroots company, and we're a grassroots podcast, so sort of coming together. And we just want to share your story because it's unique, and we don't get many stories like this in the sport, especially from athletes who are very current, very topical, and you're on the ground mixing with people who are actually using your product, which again is very unique. So, I mean, who should I start with? Josh, you're fresh off of London, but I think it would be great to paint a picture of you guys' background in the sport for people who don't know you. How did you meet? What's your relationship with running currently? Where are you at in the sport?
Yeah, sure. So I introduce myself. My name now is Josh Elston-Carr. A lot of people will probably know me as Josh Carr. So I was lucky enough to get married to a lovely woman last year whose first is called Emma Elston. And so we decided to combine our names. Running wise, I've been in the sport for a long time. So I kind of came in through the traditional route of athletics club as a junior growing up, running, the under 11s, under 13s, under 15s, track and cross country. And then really started to take the sport seriously at university and found my speciality mostly in track running, 1500 being the distance that I preferred. Raced at a reasonably high level, so I managed to sneak a Bucks medal. Was, I think, 7th at British Champs one year in 2017. And then probably career highlight, broke 4 minutes for the mile in 2022 after many years of trying. And then more recently, so still love getting out there competing, member of Cambridge and Coleridge, and I've kind of upped the distance. And so, I ran London 2 weeks ago, my debut marathon. Pretty happy with the result. I think a lot of people struggled on the day, but I coped quite well with the heat, and I came home in 2 hours, 23 minutes and 29 seconds.
Mate, very solid. And we'll get to why you coped well. Obviously, you had bicarb system. That sub 4, that is, it was in 2022, was it? That sub 4 mile.
It was a fantastic meet. It was pre-bicarb, so who knows what I'd have run with bicarb. Post shoes, so I was in the Dragonflies. It was a great race. 7 of us ran sub 4 on the Birmingham track.
Yep.
Really well set up. Ian Crow-Wright did an amazing job of keeping the pace honest in the third lap. Big thanks to him if he's a listener of the podcast.
Well, yeah, hopefully he is. And you studied at Cambridge as well. What did you study then? Because how were you able to go into creating bicarb?
So I come from a science and engineering background. I actually started studying a course called Natural Sciences, which is kind of a broad science course in Cambridge. And then I switched into engineering. So actually it's quite a good combination of the scientific background and then once you've come up with the product, actually more recently, many of the challenges have been engineering related on kind of manufacturing. How do you spin up manufacturing to cope with the demand?
Cool. We'll dive into a little bit more detail. Let's introduce Jack, partner in crime. And where do you sit in the company, Jack?
Yeah, so Josh and I are both kind of co-founders. So we're kind of, 50-50 split, like to keep things equal. So kind of, we broadly kind of share roles within the company and try and do as much as everything as we can. But I think broadly Josh is probably more on the kind of manufacturing and compliance side, and I'm probably more on the kind of the business development side and interaction with clients and social media stuff. So we kind of, luckily for both of us though, we're quite well known relatively in the running scene. We're old enough, I think Josh mentioned under 11s. That means we've been running for over 2 decades, which is not a nice thing to put in context. But we're still running quite fast. But so that's my kind of role in the company. But yeah, at Flycarb, we just kind of we're learning as we're going, and we're really enjoying the process. As you kind of mentioned, like we get to spend time with athletes in running world, but also in cycling and triathlon, etc. And it's kind of like, imagine this podcast, but kind of running a nutrition business. You get to talk about all the things that you enjoy talking about when you're doing business, which is really nice. To be able to take a hobby and a passion and then be able to turn it into like a functioning business. So yeah, it's a little bit of a flavor of kind of what I do.
I think it's important, to highlight your background as well. Now, cross-country silver medalist, sub 14-minute 5K runner, and you went through the Birmingham University, didn't you? That system there. How did you end up in Cambridge and post Birmingham?
Yeah, so kind of classic kind of grad experience, really. I applied for a number of jobs in London, Cambridge, all over the place, and got a few. And then I kind of just sort of thought, I'll give Cambridge a go. Didn't know anyone here. Didn't really know that much about the city, apart from it's quite nice to live in. And then actually Josh was, I didn't know anyone in the city, and as you do, kind of, I wasn't running super seriously at the time. I had a little bit of a break, but as you do, the first thing you go down to do is join kind of your hobby, and that was athletics for me. And I joined Cambridge and Colwood JC, and one of the first people I met actually was Josh. If you remember, cold, windy night on doing a road running session, just kind of the two of us, and then went back to the pub and had a pint with Josh. And so I almost met Josh as soon as I got here, really, which is you wouldn't know kind of like 8 years down the line that we'd be running a business together, but I guess that's how fate works.
Let's talk about the start of this business, Flycarb. When did you come up with the idea?
Yes, we really started kind of middle, just before my wedding, actually, kind of May, June last year. Really, the reason behind starting was we were hearing more and more people taking and using bicarb supplementation. And it's, we've got a lot of connections, kind of sub-elite and elite level. And it seemed to be widely used and widely accepted that it was a benefit. And there wasn't a product on the market that was affordable and accessible for everyone. And so we went away and effectively tried to work out alternative ways to... Bicarb's been known for a long time to be a performance enhancing. And the challenge has always been, how can you ingest it without having GI distress issues? And so back in the 80s, you'll hear stories of people just putting 20 grams of bicarb into a cup of water and drinking it and saying, oh man, I ran really well, but the effects afterwards were not very much fun.
Yeah.
And so we looked and realized that by combining it with this energy mix, so the product that we sell comes as 2 parts. It comes as the energy mix, which is a powder, but you mix it with water and it becomes a gel, and then the bicarb. And by mixing them together, actually we could ingest it without having the GI distress issues and get the benefits of the bicarb, which is the lactic buffering kind of effects, which we can go into more detail on. And so we started testing just in kind of June. It was kind of just Jack and myself initially doing some testing. Then over the summer, more people kind of that we knew, were just trialing it. We wanted to make sure that the product didn't just work for us, but it worked for a lot of people. And then I think we formally launched in September.
Yeah, we kind of we got we were the first guinea pigs, and then we recruited guinea pig friends, and then we had a little guinea pig army over the summer running quite fast for guinea pigs and getting PBs. And then I think I've got the date imprinted on my mind. It was the 28th of August, so kind of around the bank holiday. So the kind of when you're sitting in a pub garden thinking, shall we do it or shall we not, in the sun? And we did. And a couple of weeks later, we were kind of at the road relays and stuff, kind of with our kind of first era of the product, which people remember as the kind of the black bags. And it was that's how it developed. So it was about 6 months, wasn't it? Really, I think probably 4 or 5 months. We realised that we fell on something that actually worked, and that more importantly, we could it worked. It gave you the benefit. It didn't have any of the side effects. But more importantly, for athletes, especially kind of at the sub elite level and below, where there isn't any funding and you don't get free stuff, that we could deliver an affordable solution. And the whole ethos of the business is to keep it as affordable as possible. Not because we probably couldn't charge more, but because we really want people of all abilities who are pushing hard to kind of feel the benefit. So yeah, that was kind of the ethos of the company, really. Why not share it if we had the ability to?
Where does that passion come from? Because you guys didn't need to step in and create Flycarb. I guess it would have made your lives easier if you just continued to sit back and you could take other products, other brands out there, like everyone probably would have done because they had no choice. So where did that passion come from to actually get, talking about making it as affordable as possible?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it was kind of, if you've developed something that works, it's from a selfish perspective, it's kind of quite exciting. And we thought, oh, wow, this is a really good product. And there is an obvious gap in the market for affordable products. In terms of then kind of like, where does the passion come from and the energy? Like, we both still have like normal day jobs around Flycarb work, although increasingly Flycarb is growing, but the passion, I think, really does come from you can help people achieve their best. And I think over the summer when we saw, I'll name drop a few people like kind of Pete Cameron, for example, one of our friends from Edinburgh AC, kind of got an 800 and 1500 meter PB within 4 days. And like, he really was so happy that it worked. And he was kind of absolutely convinced it had given him this big boost. And I think when you see that kind of emotion on your friends and fellow athletes, because I think we all know the running community is really quite tight knit, and you go around all these races around the country and you see familiar faces all the time. So if we can help those people and we get to see them week in, week in, out at the Telford 10K or the road relays or, triathlon, whatever it is, like, you can't get more rewarding than that, really. Like, if you're actually physically helping someone achieve their goals by bringing something that's doesn't only work, but is affordable enough for them to take in for all races and potentially training. So I think that gratification from just seeing people achieve their goals is, you can't get much better than that.
Is that crossover for you as well, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. It's incredibly rewarding when we get contacted by people who have been working towards a goal for a long time, and then we can help them to achieve that. It almost always is the case that they're doing tons of training and they're working towards it and they're making the right decisions about, shoes that they're wearing, races that they're going to. But then to just give them that edge on the day and help someone break 16 minutes for 5K or help someone break 4 minutes for 1500. Like, I can remember how I felt when I broke some of those barriers. And it's just great to know that we're helping so many more people go through those barriers on their own journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm lucky enough to like run the Instagram account, and obviously therefore I get most of the kind of messages like that. But just like last, I think it was like the bank holiday Monday, someone messaged me, I've been trying to break 20 minutes for 5K for like 3 years. Like, I've been trying everything, like all sorts of like weird training methods and everything. And I gave your product a go, and I kind of ran 1952 today, and like, it's absolutely made my year, kind of thing. We're not saying that our product Bicarb is going to radically change how you are as an athlete, but what we are saying is that it can give you that extra kind of 1 to 3% performance gain, as kind of the scientific evidence shows. And that is enough, as Josh says, to move people kind of above or below the barriers that they're targeting. And it's pretty cool when you get messages like that, because it's kind of warms the heart. Definitely, it's really nice.
I agree. 6 months though. So from when you had the idea to when you sort of were officially selling this product in a 6 month time frame, that seems pretty quick for like a supplement. What sort of hoops, and I guess there must have been a few legal things that you guys had to go through in order to be able to sell this product. So what did that period look like? Were there any difficult challenges?
There are a few. So, we're set up as a food business, registered in Cambridge, and you have to go through a process where you demonstrate compliance of the product and compliance of your quality processes. That obviously takes time. Actually, I think probably the thing that took the most time was just building the confidence in, like Jack said, with this kind of army of guinea pigs. Like, we only wanted to start selling something once we were really quite confident that it wasn't just us that got on well with the product and liked it. And it takes a bit of time for that kind of enthusiasm and interest to diffuse through and get that critical mass of people who are interested. So I think that was probably something that took quite a while, alongside that kind of quality and compliance side of things.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth it. We won't shy away from it. We talked about the GI distress that you from taking raw bicarb, and if anyone had ever taken raw bicarb, so just purely, like Josh said, kind of eating bicarbonate of soda with water, like there's a few bushes that get fertilized after doing that, and it's kind of like having a big. It's like, I think one of our friends, Isaac McAdam, he said when he took it, it was like he'd gone on a really big night out and had a massive hangover for like the next 24 hours or so. Cause it's just like, you've got this kind of really strong alkali and this really strong acid, all the reaction, all the carbon dioxide is produced. But that initial, for us, like that was the initial worry. It was like, we were certain it worked. And we tried it on all these people. But there's always that nagging doubt in your mind that we don't want to give people a bad experience. But kind of, we're shipping, thousands and thousands of kind of bicarbs have gone out now. And it has the rate of people who've had any issues at all is almost nil, and probably less than you would expect from like a standard energy gel. And that's because kind of one of the components of the product is this kind of acts like a stomach kind of settling, kind of like a stomach foundation almost. It like allows you to kind of settles your stomach right down, and then allows you to kind of like build carbs on top of it. And for us, it's one of the learning processes has been understanding how the product can be applied in different ways, in terms of it gives these kind of second, third order benefits, and advising kind of clients how they can use it in training, etc. as well, which has been really interesting. So, but yeah, it was always a worry when we kind of started that we were trying to solve a problem that was a notorious problem, and that Josh said, 50 years or so, people have been kind of taking bicarb, and the reason it hasn't been popularized up until 2024 really is basically because of the side effect issues. But now that we got on top of those, I can only see this supplement really kind of becoming like, one of the most common you'll see in the sporting world, alongside kind of caffeine, really, because alongside caffeine, it probably is a supplement that has kind of the strongest evidence for kind of performing enhancing qualities.
So you just went through a long period of time where you were trying to get that bicarb to sort of carb mix ratio spot on.
Yeah, less the carb ratio. Actually, we've kind of deliberately designed the product with minimal carbs. And the reason for that is we wanted to try and separate out your nutrition strategy. So you can have bicarb, but then you can choose what you want to do with the rest of your carb intake.
Because some of the research does say consuming bicarb with like a carb heavy meal or something like that can help lessen the side effects after and stuff.
Yeah, so I think what we found is the gel that we make effectively encapsulates the bicarb and means that you don't need to have too much carbs at the same time. So it's kind of preventing you from needing to go down that route. And so actually our product comes with 20 grams of carbs, which you have about 2 hours before your event, which is actually a relatively light amount of carbs. But yeah, like I say, actually I see that as a huge benefit because it leaves you the choice as what you want to do with your carb intake later on. So, for example, for me in the marathon, I did take bicarb. I took bicarb about 90 to 75 minutes before the start of the race. Then between then and the start of the race, I was using a product that we're planning to bring out quite soon, which was a drink mix, which had 50 grams of carbs in. And I was sipping on that all the way to the start of the race. But I could have chosen not to. If that didn't suit me, I could have chosen to leave it and have a gel really close to the start of the race, or do something else. And so that flexibility to choose what you want to do, I think, is one of the benefits of our specific bicarb product.
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, people will have individual preferences depending on the event they're doing as well. Yeah, I wanted to. So the production, the time it took you to create one sachet of bicarb back then versus now.
Yeah.
What are the differences? Was it like a day's work to produce a sachet when you first started, or versus maybe 20 minutes now?
No. For quite a while, we were effectively hand filling sachets, and we got pretty good. I think we were probably up in the kind of 100 per hour kind of region. Now we've moved over. We have manufacturing set up with machinery, so it's an automated process, and we do batch runs. So whereas previously we were doing small batches of 100 or 200 here, now we're doing batches of many thousand on a machine that runs. The machine runs at something like 20 a minute. So you can churn out a lot of bicarb in a day.
Have you got that demand then? Clearly.
Not 20 a minute. No, sadly not. I think we'd have quit our jobs if that happened. But no, we have seen a huge increase in demand. It's okay, roughly like 30-40% a month at the moment, growing that kind of rate.
But give you a little picture of what was our daily life like, I guess, like in the early days might be quite interesting. So like as Josh said, we kind of up until relatively recently we were working full-time normal jobs. Josh as an engineer, myself as like a planner and policy kind of guy. And kind of our day would be like, basically in the morning it would be a combination of like social media stuff, kind of handwriting orders on packaging, packing the orders ourselves, running to the post boxes or Yodel or whatever it is with kind of as our morning run, posting it, kind of doing the day job, doing training. Then the evening would be like kind of doing a big batch of bicarb, kind of packing it all up, like then having to dress down all the facility that we were using, and kind of it was like kind of hand to mouth. We were like literally just responding to demand, doing it all ourselves. Like we were the postie, we were the factory, kind of we were the social media engine, like all that kind of stuff. It was quite I remember we got to December and the kind of trajectory had really started to kick up, and I think we had a few bags under our eyes kind of thing at the time. It was pretty tiring, so we were very glad to move to machinery, but it was like really exciting. It was like kind of, I don't know, it was all a bit fuzzy because it was just like so intense, and like everything was like kind of like we were working like big hours in the week, but like it was that kind of, when you just like something new, so exciting, like you get that like fuzzy feeling inside, like you can't beat it. And it was certainly like a really interesting growth period. And now that we've professionalized and we're using the manufacturing, it's enabling us to do much more in terms of diversification of products, which will be coming out soon, in terms of reaching new markets, launching in Europe, launching in America, all this great stuff. But there's always that element of like nostalgia back for like kind of the early days. Like, it was quite a unique thing to be doing. So yeah, our lives have been the last 6 months have been quite interesting.
Oh, it's seriously impressive. I can only imagine what it means to you guys as well. But I think, are we allowed to compare? Are you boys comfortable comparing to? Obviously, Morton was the first one who kind of really started to push this bicarb towards elite athletes. Talk about the difference in price between you guys and them, but also are there differences in the product, or is bicarb a relative? We do hear of athletes taking just bicarb straight off the shelf, like you said, mixing it with water. Are there differences in the product?
Well, so price is huge difference. I think RRP Morton's £60 for 4 doses. RRP for us, £17 for 3 doses. So you're talking about basically 15 quid a dose versus 5. And if you want to buy more from us, I think we're £44.99 for 10 doses. So less than £5 a dose. So less than a third of the price. Yes, you can go and buy bicarb from Tesco and put it in water. Don't recommend it. It's not a fun experience. So you will save some money, but you're sacrificing your health, and probably not a great idea.
And also,
But
your
I think
time,
there are.
everything after it, you just feel terrible after taking it. So yeah, don't try this at home is the answer.
We also actually think we've got a better product for a couple of other reasons. So Morton, you mix in 40 grams of carbs into 200 mil. So it's actually really a lot of carbs and quite a large amount of volume to consume 2 hours before the race. We, with 20 grams of carbs and 60 mil, have a lot less volume to consume. Several people have said to us, actually, they find it much easier to consume bicarb, by Flycarb, than to consume the kind of high Morton carb dose and volume at the same time. So I think we're a cheaper product that's also got some benefits in terms of allowing you to choose your nutrition strategy and just simply easier to consume because there's less of it.
And I think the reason the Morton product has the higher amount of carbs, see, people know about it. Know you get like a little bowl, and then you have to make up this kind of 200 mil of the kind of gel to eat. The main reason for that is because Morton provide their bicarb in little pellets or tablets, and you'll know, like, if you take like a paracetamol tablet or whatever, it's quite hard to swallow. So because you've got to swallow like this bag of pellets of kind of bicarb compounded into pellets, you need that higher volume of gel kind of in order to actually swallow them all. So it's more about the function of swallowing the tablets for the Morton rather than like a carb strategy piece. And as Josh said, like, our philosophy is that we want to give you all the benefits of bicarb with minimal disruption to your nutritional strategy for a race. If you like, we don't want to, because we're effectively providing like 20 grams of carbs, which is like 80 calories or so of carbs. It really doesn't change what you need to do kind of around your race. And kind of that was our philosophy of the product as well. Like, let people get on with what they do and not try and change radically what they do before a race.
So you can just shot yours, basically. You can just...
Yeah, it's about, what is it, probably 4 tablespoons.
Yeah,
I reckon
maybe a bit
I
less,
do it.
3
I do it
tablespoons.
in 3, Josh. To be honest, you know, I'm a
Yeah.
big tablespoon kind of guy. No, I think it's fair to say we probably consume it more than anyone else. And yeah, sometimes I get like kind of put it in my little bowl and I just scrape it all in one and swallow it. But I think the tactic to get it down is probably get your tablespoon, 2 or 3 tablespoons, and kind of swallow it straight away, because we won't shy away from the fact that bicarb is as effectively as salt. So it doesn't taste that nice. It's like kind of the blunt aspect of the product, but the benefits are massive for like kind of 20 seconds of a bad taste. And as the strap line is increasingly becoming for the company, taste is temporary, but PBs are permanent, Matt.
I love it, boys. You are doing such a good job. You talk about the salt ratio and stuff like that. I mean, Josh, you used it on the marathon, and I saw you write the article about how potentially it's actually benefiting people. It's able to hydrate them, or they're able to stay hydrated for longer in these kind of hot, humid conditions as well.
Yeah, so, less research being done on this, but certainly it was a warm day at London. I think a lot of people found that, especially in the back half of the race. And one of the challenges on a hot day is you sweat a lot. Sweat's got sodium, salts, electrolytes in it, and you need to replace those. Actually, so if I take a 16-gram portion of bicarb, I'm about 70 kilos. That's got about 4 grams of sodium in. And that is, it depends on exactly how concentrated your sweat is and a lot of other factors. But actually, that goes a long way towards replenishing all the sodium that you're going to lose. So whereas initially we thought maybe the high sodium is a negative, it's something we would ideally not have, but we'll accept it because we get the benefits of the bicarb. Actually, particularly for these longer races, hotter races, I think there is a potential benefit of the sodium at the same time. And it's really interesting. You talk about London. I think I listened. You had Jake Smith on maybe a week ago or so. I thought it was fascinating to hear his side of running next to Alex Yee and Alex having his nutrition strategy nailed down, exactly what bottles he was going to have, exactly how much he was going to have, versus Jake, who, huge props to him, he's done an amazing job, ran an amazing time. It sounds like he can massively improve still by working on that nutrition strategy. And I think as a sport, we're slightly behind. I think triathletes, maybe just because it's a longer event. And so I think as the event duration increases, it becomes more obvious that you need to work on your nutrition. Certainly cycling, if you look at what's happened in the Tour de France, I think there's been a huge sea change in how they approach nutrition over the last 10 or so years. And I think it's coming to running. Flycarb is aiming to be part of that and help educate people as to what do you need to do from your nutrition perspective, not just bicarb, but also salts and carbohydrate loading in order to get the best performance out of you on the day. But yeah, salt helped me on the day at London. I pulled through. I think I went from 8th to 46th in the second half.
Yeah.
I overtook a lot of good guys.
Yeah, I think Josh's splits was it pretty much 72, 71. So 71, 72. And I think there were very few people, apart from quite a large number of people taking bicarb, who were able to kind of actually deliver a relatively even race, just because it really was cooking by the end, wasn't it? Getting up to near 20, and it was obviously testament to Josh's training and his pacing strategy. But yeah, you and kind of a number of our other customers kind of noted that they were kind of not cramping up. They were able to stay pretty strong and also crucially kind of take on those carbs because their stomach felt pretty strong with the bicarb. So yeah, interesting.
People are taking it. You talk about cycling. Aren't they taking it during these rides now as well? But during a 3-4 race.
Let me explain that. So what you're aiming to do with bicarb is increase the concentration of the HCO3 minus ion, which is the kind of alkali part of the bicarb. That counteracts the positive ion, the H plus ion that you get from lactic acid. Yep. And that's the kind of bad bit. Your body and your muscles don't work very well when they become super acidic. Now, when you ingest the bicarb, it takes some time to get into your system, and then you get an increase in the concentration of the H3 minus. Typically, the peak is around 2 hours after ingestion. And that's why we normally recommend that you ingest bicarb 2 hours before the start of your race. After that, your body is an amazing piece of engineering. It knows that the balance is not quite exactly as it should be, i.e. you've done something that's unusual, and it works to bring back that HCO3 minus concentration to normal. And so what you see this rise over about 2 hours, but then it will fall again over the next roughly sort of 3-4 hours back to the normal level. And so what you've got in cycling, where you're doing events that are much, much longer, if you were to take it 2 hours before the start of the race, sure, you'd be like in a brilliant lactic buffering position at the start of the race, but by the end of the race, you've returned back to your normal level and you don't have the benefit. And so what those guys are doing is actually taking it on. Even there's a great photo of Mick Woods, forget which race it was in, I think it might have been the World Championships. World Championships is normally a 6 or 7 hour race, and I think he's on the bike spooning in a competitor's product, not bicarb by Flycarb just yet, but a bicarb supplement about 4 hours before the end, or 3 or 4 hours before the end of the race. The idea being that he gets that benefit at the right time.
Yeah,
and we've seen that. So that's why I took bicarb a bit closer to the start of the marathon, to try and overlap as much of the benefit with the actual kind of meaty bit of the race, that kind of back half of the race.
And that's especially true with cycling, because the first couple of hours can often be, many stages can be quite processional, in the sense that you're just sitting in a pack, kind of working at a kind of below threshold rate. You're not working too hard, so you want to have that kind of buffering capacity for when you're on one of the big climbs, or when the moves are starting to happen, etc., etc. So it's it made much more sense to kind of maximize the effectiveness of that window, which we've also been, I think, kind of combining two threads of our conversation in terms of the sodium benefits and then also the kind of how you make that kind of window peak, working with customers such as Alex Milne and Joe Turner, who went to the World 100k champs in India. They again adjusted when they took their bicarb, taking it pretty much right on the start of the race. And then I'm speaking to Joe, who was part of that bronze medal winning team with the 100k champs in India, and he's talking about actually on one of his really long races, probably up to 100 miles, he's thinking about getting kind of bicarb actually positioned at one of the feed stations so he can take it during the race, so that he's kind of has that kind of a top up for that buffering capacity when it really starts to bite.
I think this is what, especially over the last year, we've seen bicarb. We talk about it in these endurance races as well, but then it seems to work really well over the country in cross-country elements. These hillier races, we used to just associate bicarb with 8s and 15s. But now it seems to have a use just across the board, no matter what event you're doing. And I guess the benefits are slightly different. You talk about that higher sodium intake when you're doing these endurance races, etc. But it seems to work no matter what event you do.
Yeah, it was crazy. The national cross-country championships, I think, obviously, in the men's side, we had Richard Slade taking the title there using bicarb. And then I think it was like 5 out of the top 10 at national cross country using the product on the men's side, which was crazy. Like, I remember speaking to people after finishing, I was just like, yeah, a course like Parliament Hill, where it's kind of almost like a fartlek, because you've just got these attritional kind of downhill muddy sections where you're not working that hard, but it's quite technical. And then you're smashing yourself up the big climbs. And then you've got those few sections where you're actually able to run at pace. And it's kind of like, you look at the profile in terms of where you are in relation to your lactate threshold, you'll be spiking up and down it all the time. And yeah, it definitely seemed to work really effectively on courses like that. So yeah, with our initial build probably really came from that cross-country season, really domestically. And yeah, 100%. If you think about, we often talk about events being like aerobic and anaerobic, but in reality, every event is a blend. There are micro accelerations, there are moves, there are kicks, there are changes in inclines, sprint finishes. Like, even a marathon isn't purely aerobic. There's lots of different phases of races, and you need to respond, and you need to rally, you need to take hills, etc., etc. So yeah, you can see the application in so many areas. Really, benefits will vary in terms of both that overall performance benefit and then the sodium benefits, for example, and the stomach settling kind of qualities will come more into the endurance races, whereas 8 and 15s will be more focused on that pure buffering capacity. But it's definitely like a learning process for us, and it's great to speak to customers who are kind of relaying all that really interesting feedback, which is great for us in terms of kind of developing the product and advising people.
Boys, where do you sit with young athletes taking bicarb? Do you encourage that? Is it ethically? Is it a bit sort of crossing a line if you're encouraging them to take these supplements like really early doors? Many of them won't even be taking caffeine. It's something we do see just kind of once you get to 18, 19, 20, you're like, okay, yeah, now we're going to take caffeine before a race. Do you encourage youngsters to take this?
No, I mean, running the kind of Instagram and socials account, I'm often the kind of the first kind of wall of the company that people kind of hit. And our rule is really bicarb, in our opinion, should be for adults in terms of kind of 16 plus, when they have kind of got that autonomy to take that decision. And that's our advice, because as Josh said, we started as under 11s, under 13s kind of running. And when you're that age, like the beauty of the sport should be simplicity. It's really fun. You're going down and doing it with your mates. It should be about kind of personal improvement and not too much pressure. While there might not necessarily be lots of evidence when you're kind of early teens of why it's bad for you, and we just morally, ethically would rather keep it as kind of 16 plus. What we've had on a few occasions is kind of coaches of 15-year-olds and or parents of, say, 15-year-olds kind of ask us like, oh, can my son, daughter take this? And our advice is, we'd probably prefer them to be adults, but as their parent or guardian, this is what the product contains, and it is ultimately your decision. We can't not sell to you, but our advice is very strongly that it should be kept for kind of 16 plus, really.
And on that, the ratios of how much you should take, obviously that depends on what sort of athlete you are. Can you overdose? Like the more you take, does that mean that
So most of the research has been done on doses between 0.2 grams per kilogram of body weight and 0.4 grams of bicarb per kilogram of body weight. We have 3 products, a 12 gram, which is suitable for people up to 60 kilos, 16 grams, which is for between 60 and 80 kilos, and 20 grams for above. With those doses, you're at approximately 0.3, which is kind of middle of the range. And it varies, if you're 61 kilos and you take 16 grams, you're going to be slightly higher. But there's quite a broad window, like I say, that 0.2 to 0.4, where actually there's been studies done that suggest that's the window where you get the benefit. Going above that doesn't really help. Going below that, you don't really get as much of a benefit. But as long as you're in that window, you're okay.
Is there a world where, obviously, now elites are leaning towards basically just trying to consume as much carbohydrate as they possibly can during a marathon, etc. Is there a world where the more you can consume of bicarb, the better you're going to kind of buffer lactic?
No, I think there's been enough research to suggest going above 0.4 doesn't help.
Work.
Yeah,
and I think that it's just, and also like it's just that the evidence isn't there to demonstrate that just load it. It's not, it's kind of not an infinite line. It's kind of like a bell curve, like the effectiveness it will just drop off when you have kind of too much. But also the fact to consider it is a salt, and the more you take, the more salt you'll be consuming in your diet. Josh said the kind of 16 gram portion of bicarb, which is kind of most average male distance runners would be taking. It's about 4 grams of sodium in that, so it's relatively high dosage of sodium. So you need to also consider like the balance of kind of your health versus chasing a performance goal in terms of taking more than the recommended. But more importantly, as Josh said, like once you get above that 0.4, actually you're probably just taking more for the sake of it rather than actually needing it. And imagine kind of bodybuilders just taking way too much protein. Actually, there's only so much processing your body can do, and the rest of it's probably going down the toilet.
And then the side effects of taking it. When you I've actually never took bicarb before. If I was to take bicarb, can your stomach cope with it better and better the more you take? So if you were to sort of, let's say you've got a peak race in 4 weeks time, is it better to kind of just take it once a week until that race in order to just make sure you can actually cope with it on race day? Or does that not really change how you sort of respond?
So I think we would always recommend trying something in training first.
Of course.
You want to, one, get used to the process. There's a bit of understanding the process. 2, understand how you feel. So, I think it's quite normal that people might burp once or twice after having bicarb. There's no big issue with that. Personally, because of the high sodium, I notice that I get slightly more thirsty, and that's okay. I tend to, drink a bit of extra water to cope with that. That seems quite individual. I think Jack, for example, doesn't really seem to notice that. But we definitely recommend before race day, try it in training, get used to the process, understand how it works for you. We found people find that like having it regularly in training because it makes them recover quicker. So there could be a benefit of, leading up to a race, taking it for that reason. But you will get all of the benefit just by taking it on race day.
Just as a one-off as well.
Versus something like, people talk about kind of loading onto creatine or loading onto beta-alanine, where you're taking it every single day to get kind of a baseline. That's not the case. What you're really doing is a kind of temporary adjustment to your HCO3 minus the bicarbonate ion level in your blood, and that's temporary. That happens after you ingest it, and it returns back to normal within kind of 6 or so hours.
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I often get asked kind of on socials is, can I take this for the first time on my race? And the answer is, as Josh effectively says, yes, you can. But if you, for example, take one of your athletes, Matt, if they came to you and said, I've just been given 3 new caffeine energy gels from a company, shall I take this before national cross country, which I'm hoping to podium in for the first time? I think your advice as a coach is probably going to be, well, hang on a minute, like you're in great shape, you're a great athlete, like why would you risk taking something completely new? So it's always good to just get used to the process and take it. And we found the product to be incredibly robust, but like the golden rule of sport is don't try something new on the day, basically. But in terms of the training benefit though, as Josh said, I use it for my main Tuesday interval session. The main reason I use that is because it really helps me. Because you've got that buffering capacity for kind of 5 or so hours, it really helps me have massive difference in terms of my recovery. I've noticed, like I can actually do like back-to-back sessions if I need to in 2 days now, because it really kind of helps to clear out your legs. And I found that to be a really important part. And that's why I kind of use it in training. But we're not going to push that because we're about being an affordable brand. If you want to choose to do that, then great. If you only want to use it on race day or competition day, then that's absolutely fine too.
Do you see a world currently that unless you're taking bicarb, you're just not going to be able to compete? Like you spoke about National Cross and how many in that top 10. I mean, Bucks was the same, right? I've heard from a lot of people, Bucks outdoors just over the weekend, almost everyone in a final is probably consuming bicarb. Is that where we are now?
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to that. I think at the top end of the sport, where it is the narrow margins that make the difference, the Bucks finals, going up, racing at kind of international level. Yeah, I think if you're not getting your nutrition right, and I include bicarb within that, you're leaving time on the table and you won't be competitive.
Yeah. My view is that at the elite, sub-elite, and that kind of, say for a man, sub kind of 18 to 20 minute 5K, for a woman that kind of, sub 21 to 22, it will become, I think there's a world where it becomes almost as endemic, not quite as caffeine. It probably won't do kind of maybe amongst the masses just because it's slightly more expensive than taking caffeine fundamentally, although it will provide the same benefit. But at that kind of, basically, everyone listening to this podcast, I imagine, will probably in a couple of years' time, I reckon, probably be taking kind of a bicarb supplement, as it has that chance to become endemic. And yeah, if you watch, the perfect comparator is carbon shoes, really. The benefits of bicarb would probably, if you look at the studies, probably broadly comparison to that kind of, say, 3% or so gains. Look how quickly that kind of like swept through the endurance world. And if you look at the kind of price per use of a pair of carbon shoes, whereas versus a portion of our bicarb at least, you're actually probably getting better value for money with bicarb than you are from a pair of kind of, unnamed, I won't mention any brands, carbon shoes. So, that's one way of looking at it.
Hey, this is backed by sports shoes, so please mention as many shoes
Any
as possible.
I can just name 10 if you want.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I think we're almost at that place already. And certainly psychologically, I think people are starting to feel at a disadvantage if they're not taking this. Is there any advice for people who just can't get on with it? Like, people who just, I know you've said there, if you consume it right and get the right ratios, there's little side effects, but will there be people out there who just can't consume bicarb?
I think that the biggest barrier for some people has definitely been the initial consumption with the taste. So I think we've got two pieces of advice there. One is, we're innovating. We brought out a mint product. So mint flavoring helps mask the kind of flavor of the bicarb to improve the taste. So that's first hint is, buy the mint product. And second is just speed, just as quickly as possible, get it down.
Yeah, I think one thing I would maybe use this kind of space to just mention is, because of that taste problem, we often find people asking, can I add something to the bicarb? So the thing to remember is, firstly, we've got our mint product, which is available now. We've also got another flavor in prototype development, which will hopefully be another game changer. But until that point, the rule is you've got to remember that bicarb is an alkali. So you should not be adding anything acidic to the bicarb, because if you do, it will react in the mix, and then it will have already started reacting and you could get GI distress. So if you're going to add anything, make it the mint, because we specially formulated that to be absolutely secure. But if you're going to do anything, make sure it's got a neutral pH. So, for example, do not add anything with citric acid, or almost all flavorings are unfortunately acidic. Maybe the one that you could use is a treacle, because that has a relatively neutral pH. But please, everyone out there, don't be going adding orange juice, Vimto, Diet Coke. These are some of the legit ones I've had coming in.
Yeah.
Just don't do it, because the bicarb will then react. You'll not only lose the effectiveness of the performance gains, but then you'll then potentially expose yourself to the GI kind of distress issues Josh discussed.
Even morning of a race, a glass of orange juice.
Oh no, just at the same time.
So just at the same time.
Okay.
So what we say basically is, for a 20-minute window before, 20-minute window afterwards, try and avoid having anything acidic. So avoid your coffee, avoid your orange juice. It's fine to have water, fine to have a gel, but that window.
When I was saying those acidic things, it was like people are literally adding Diet Coke to their bicarb.
These people addicted to Diet Coke.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember I had to have a kind of polite kind of conversation with someone saying that was probably a bad idea. But yeah, so in terms of into the other nutritional stuff, eat as normal before you take your bicarb, eat as normal after it. But as Josh said, if people just leave like a 20-minute window before taking it and then a 20-minute window after taking it, just so it gets in there, does its thing, and then feel free to go straight back onto, if you need your Diet Coke, then you can have it, but probably best not before a race. But yeah, get onto your normal strategy then.
Okay, right. That's interesting that kind of, what you eat around it, as long as you give it, that 20-minute window, doesn't actually affect things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, boys, you've grown in the space of a year, pretty much. You've rebranded in that time, and you are a staple, especially domestically. You talk about now wanting to branch out to the US. I mean, where do you see Flycarb in the next year or two? Like, are you boys going to have to take this on full time? Are you going to have to quit the day job?
I don't know. Maybe. Look, we're at the moment really one product in one country in one sport, and we love sport, and that's where we come from. That's our grassroots. But we've got ambitions. We've already started shipping into Europe. We've just announced we're shipping into America. So we're growing the countries. We've got new products in the pipeline. We think we've got some pretty compelling new products coming along, and we think we can break into sports outside of just kind of pure distance running, maybe start with the other endurance sports. But actually, we're also really interested in, things like boxing, where, they go through multiple rounds, and actually that kind of recovery benefit between the rounds could be huge for them. So a lot of areas that we can grow in, and Jack and I are going to put everything we've got into making it as big as possible.
Continuing to collect a few more guinea pigs in other sports.
Well, too many.
No, I think it is interesting as well how, we spoke about how it works, in multiple different races, endurance races, but also, how you can maybe make it work in other sports too. Even like football, do you think it could have benefit? Just repeated sprint sports.
My brother-in-law plays hockey for the army, and recently used bicarb in the inter-services competition, and actually there, you're doing effectively repeated sprints, right? You sprint up the pitch, and then you recover, and then you sprint up the pitch again, and having that ability in the back half of the, not race, is it, match, to be recovered and still be able to go up to those kind of top speeds, it's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So I think we certainly will see growth in those areas as well. It will just take us a bit longer because, it's a new sport. You've got to build up the kind of confidence in the product, confidence in the company before people will start to widely adopt it.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the hit the nail on the head, Matt. Team sports where it's effectively repeated sprints. It's kind of perfect for what bicarb does. You kind of like constantly anaerobic effort, aerobic recovery, repeated combat sports where it's intense anaerobic activity, whether that's judo, boxing, whatever, throws, punches, etc. Then recovery between bouts and rounds, and then obviously the endurance sports that we've got traction in, such as cycling and triathlon. But then increasingly, one of our big areas of growth is sports like high rocks, where we've had a couple of world records and European records kind of done there, where it's kind of just like that combination of big anaerobic bursts and then kind of aerobic activity in between. Kind of makes sense when you kind of start to think about it. So hopefully, we've got that distance runners mentality of putting the graft in and the work, and hopefully with a combination of that graft and kind of keeping people helping to spread the word and some kind of bit of marketing, we can do some pretty cool stuff.
Oh, that's just brilliant. Wish you guys the best of luck, and Josh, I'll see you next week at the varsity match.
Yeah. See you there. Good
Take
luck.
care, gents.
Cheers.